With Joseph B. Wightman and Dr. Leo J. Hofsnyder, June 7th, 1977, on Captiva Island. Joe, when you first came to the island as a young boy, were there any coconuts here?
On Captiva, there was a pretty good coconut grove right where the is what's called South Sea Plantation now. Although I understood the first person to plant coconuts on the west coast of Florida was Mr. Armsby, who lived on the west edge of Buck Key.
Where did he get the coconuts, do you know?
That I do not know. I remember them telling about some of the neighbors sort of laughing at him. It says that it would be, he was planting something for his grandchildren. But that turned out not to be true, because if a coconut is properly planted, where they dig a hole down to water and then fill the hole back up with trash and plant a coconut into it so it'll wick from the salt water up and fertilized properly, they can have bearing coconuts by the end of 8 years from the time it's put in the sprouted nut.
Now, I noticed that there are some banana trees on the island. When did they first appear here?
They were here when I came in 1917. The most popular banana out here is the Ladyfinger Banana. They're a very sweet banana, but they're very small. The cavish, dwarf cavish will grow here, but they're very delicate. They don't thrive as good as either the Ladyfinger or the Highland Plantain. It's the Highland Plantain that I have most of in my yard. They're a good cooking banana. You can, if you fry them, they'll taste a good deal like sweet potatoes.
But you don't know who brought the first bananas here?
I do not know. That was already here when I came.
When you came.
And,
now, as a child, when you got here, did you know how to swim?
Oh, I didn't, because I came from the state of Washington. All the other children on the island knew how. Some of them learned to swim so young they didn't even remember learning. It was like learning to walk and swim so near the same time, like most people don't remember learning to walk. I was fortunate in having a few of the neighbors give me a few free swimming lessons, so as I learned very soon after coming here.
Where did you learn, in the Gulf or the Bay?
Oh, I learned out in the Gulf, because our house was up on the front ridge, so that was the Gulf was practically our own front yard. It was only about 50 yards from our house down to the beach.
Were there any sharks around in the Gulf then?
At that time, they were fishing the sharks out for the leather. They may have been sharks a short time prior to that, but soon thereafter, the sharks got to be a very scarce article. The Ocean Leather Company was down about almost where Ways Marina is now, on Sanibel, on the bay side. Was where they had a big retort where they'd cook the shark to get the oil out of it, and I don't know what process they put the sharks through to after they skinned them, but the leather was the most important thing in during World War I. And then after the Ocean Leather Company went broke, they never did open it up as the leather company again. Although parts of the sharks were fished out again during World War II to get the oil from their livers, which was used as a vitamin product.
How did they catch these sharks?
They were netted by for the ocean leather people. The nets that they used was made out of a twine that was almost like a quarter-inch rope that had been tarred. It was, well, I don't know whether them run through a tar process was to keep the rope from rotting quick, or whether that was part of the preservative, so as to, or whether that was as a part of a camouflage. I didn't know enough. I didn't inquire at that time.
What were Were these gill nets?
They were gill nets.
They must have had pretty large.
It worked on the same principle as the nets that the tarpon, or not tarpon, pompano fishermen are using now, only a lot larger match.
Something like a trammel net?
It didn't necessarily have to have crambles onto them, but the hardest fish to clear that seems to be related to the shark, at least to have skin, is a sawfish. A sawfish hits a net and then it rolls the entire net up like a rope. It's and anybody having to clear a net with the sawfish in it, the proper thing to do is the minute you can get that saw bill up over something where you can hit it with a axe or a machete, remove the saw bill from the fish, that takes the greater part of the danger out of him.
Did they do any shrimping around here when you were young?
They caught shrimp for bait and for their own use. The commercial fishermen for shrimp fishers hadn't got organized yet, or and neither was the crab fishermen. So of course we knew that crabs was good to eat, and would get them and for local consumption, but
not commercially.
Not commercially at that time.
What did you do for clothing when you were a child?
The most of my clothes was what my mother made for me, and they well, neighbor children were dressed about the same way. We a lot of the clothes was made out of anything from flour sacks to feed sacks. If the feed sacks was made from cotton, we didn't use any hemp bags in our clothing.
Well, if they weren't made from flour sacks, where did you get other cloth?
Almost everything that we bought at those times that didn't come through the grocery store or through the Punta Gorda Fish Company, we bought from Sears Roebuck. Everybody had a Sears Roebuck catalog that they would get once or twice a year. That wound up at the end of the life cycle of the Sears Roebuck catalog was usually used as toilet paper.
Now, when the people around here went fishing, where did they procure their boats?
The Punta Gorda Fish Company had somebody that made boats on a contract that were made on the same design, that were branded, that we could borrow from the fish company. Everybody could recognize them almost at the sight, but the personal ones were a lot of them were handmade by the individual. That is like trout fishing boats.
How were these powered? Were they hand powered?
No, the Hartford engine was very popular amongst the fishermen when I come, but they was changing over to what they called a Palmer at that time. And the large diesels at that time was Fairbanks and Morris, like the Punta Gorda Fish Company used in their run boats. And those were called semi-diesels. They had to be head up with a blowtorch to get started. And when I came back from World War II, I stuck my head down in the engine room of the Harris brothers, and they still had the same old engine sitting in there, but they'd taken the blow torches off the cylinder heads and replaced it with glow plugs to modernize the same engine. But that engine must have been in service for somewhere between 35 and 40 years.
When you first came to the island, how did you get here? Was there a ferry then?
There was no ferry. The ferry didn't. The first ferry service between Sanibel and Ponderosa was put there by Collier in 1925. So my folks came from Punta Gorda out on the Wallace, which was a fish boat run. The Wallace ran from the ice plant in Punta Gorda, bringing ice to the fish houses and the customers on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. It went the other direction, carrying fish back to the fish company on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays.
Where did this boat stop?
It stopped at the city dock, which was right along the side of Andy's Pier. That dock's about fallen pieces now,
Yes.
what's left of it. And they stopped at the ice house, Blind Pass Fish House. Used to be northwest of where the Gorton Bailey Bridge is now, as you look right straight out from Blind Pass. And at that time there was 3 fishermen houses set on stilts right along the edge of that bar, and the ice house was east of there, right to the edge of the channel. So that goes.
Those are gone now, aren't they?
They are gone. Here a short time ago, I seen 2 or 3 of the steaks still there that the bugs had eat off.
Then
But
after the boat stopped there, where did it go? Did it go over to Sanibel?
From there, it went to. If it had something to deliver in Tarpon Bay, it used to go in there to the packing shed. And then from there to St. James City, and then I think it may have touched back on Sanibel. I know it did, because Clarence Rutland used to be the iceman for Sanibel. And
Would that have been where Bailey's old dock was?
it would be, if it didn't land at Bailey's, the old dock, it would. That's probably where it landed most of the time, because the next dock that was used by Collier's was almost where the causeway comes in now, or somewhere between Bailey's and there. That would have been city dock. It'd be at the end of what they call Bailey's Road, or so it'd be in between those 2 places.
Now, in addition to the Wallace, to the Punta Gorda fish boat, were there any other boats operating around here that long ago?
Yes. Punta Gorda Fish Company had a couple other run boats, but of course this was called the Wallace's Run. But if they pulled it up a couple times a year for on dry dock to overhaul it, usually they pinch-hitted with the Harris brothers. And the other boats company that served the islands, of course, is Kinsey Brothers. They had 3 steamboats, the Dixie, the Gladys, and a riverboat that we called Success. And then they had the Bellamires, which was a tugboat that moved their barges around. It was a smaller boat, but so they didn't haul freight on it, but it would pull the barges that had the
How often
freight
did the
on
Kinsey
top.
boats come over to the islands?
The Kinsey had the mailboat mail contract, so it was a daily run. That the usually the Gladys was it left Kinsey's pier that was very close to where the new bridge was built, where it landed, comes in on the north, or wait a minute, that'd be the south side of the Caloosahatchee, or the north shore of Fort Myers. They would leave there at 6 o'clock in the morning, and usually they docked out here around noon, and they docked.
Where would they dock? Over here?
They would dock two places here. They would dock at the mail delivery, and if there was any freight, they would dock at the city to let put off or take on freight at the city dock, which was right alongside of where Andy's Pier is now.
And that was a daily run?
That was a daily run, and if there was a load of lumber or sometimes passengers, where they'd even land at the private docks, like at Armsby's or down at Tweenwaters or places along there, if there was freight to justify the extra landing.
Yes. Well, when did the ferry come in here?
The ferry, the first ferry was Collier's, but it sank in the 26 hurricane. And about a year later, Kinsey picked up the franchise and put on the Best of Fort Myers was his first ferry. Captain Crumpler is retired now, but he still lives at Ponderosa, and he was a skipper on that ferry for I guess until it was finally did away with.
I remember Leon Crumpler very well.
Yes, and the first runs of the ferry, just enough to maintain the franchise, was he would make a trip across to Sanibel Island in the morning and pick up whoever wanted to go to town and go back to Ponderosa, and then he'd make another trip between 4 and 5 o'clock. That means take off at Ponderosa side at 4 o'clock and be 4:30 on this side and back over there by 5 o'clock. It took that ferry 1/2 of an hour to make the trip one way, and that was enough to keep up his franchise. And yet there was a few times that he ran without any customers. There was so few people on the islands at that time. But later on, just before they went out of business, they had 3 ferries and still couldn't keep up with the traffic, and running constantly from the time they were supposed to be run the first ferry in the morning until running overtime at night. That you would remember.
Yes.
When they,
oh, yes.
That was just when they finally got round to building the bridge and causeway.
Yes.
Shortly thereafter. So one of those ferries is running from the north end of Pine Island across to one of the islands up there and back. They moved over.
Still running?
It was here a short time ago, I guess.
Yes.
It still is.
Now, Joe, 50 or 60 years ago, when there were, unfortunately, when there was a death on the island, where did they bury the people?
We have a little cemetery up here on the right
Near the chapel by the
south
sea.
of the chapel by the sea.
Yes, but there aren't many people in there, and most of the people you have mentioned are not buried there. Some of them are, but very
Some of them
few.
are and some of them are not. There was
Where are the rest of them?
there was a private cemetery near Wilford, and then there's another at the Gray Gables. There was a
Yes.
little private cemetery in their yard.
The knots are in
And
there.
then the one that down there in the sloughs of Sanibel, there's a several there. That's an unorganized cemetery that they a lot of people use. That I don't think was ever dedicated as a cemetery, but it was,
Yes.
everybody used it for that.
Well, I can recall some years ago going over on the ferry to have burials in Fort Myers.
Yes, there was.
When did that start?
That I don't know when it started, because there was a few of them that had made arrangements with funeral parlors in there, even before we had the ferry service that would be shipped by boat into a funeral home. But there was a few people that all they did was to put them in a pine box and had the local funeral with no outside help whatsoever.
You must have gone to some funerals in Fort Myers, didn't you?
I went to them in both ways. I guess I've been pole bar the greater part of my life, it seems like, for my neighbors and.
Would many of the
different people.
islanders go over to funerals?
The Kinsey company for several years would run a one free ferry for the islanders that went to the funerals, and a lot of them took advantage of it. So
What do you mean take advantage of it?
well, there would be some of them that would, if they could get the free ferry, they'd go to the funeral, or maybe they could pick up everything else that they wanted while they was in town.
Instead of going to the funeral.
Or combination of both.
Now, Joe, how long did you go to school on the island?
I had a couple years here. The last school teacher was Robert Knowles. He lives right down here at Main Street on Sanibel.
Well, why did you only go for 2 or 3 years?
They after the 1919 hurricane broke over what we call Protection Ridge, it killed the grapefruit groves, and some of the farmers went broke, and they thought they'd have better chances someplace else. Where by that time the railroad was coming into Fort Myers, and that meant that they could get their fertilizer 20 cents a sack cheaper over there on a siding someplace than what they could delivered here to the islands, and 15 cents less for the per bushel for the fruit being shipped away. And farming became so competitive that last 20 or 30 cents makes the difference of whether a person can stay in business or goes broke.
So why did they close the school?
Because nobody ever lived here anymore.
There were not enough kids?
The farmers is the ones that raised the large families. When they moved away, there was not enough children to justify having a school over here.
Oh, so then you didn't quit school, the school quit you.
That's the idea.
Well, then what did you do for education after that?
After that, I took correspondence courses.
Well, no, you didn't do it right away because you were only about 11 or 12 years old.
Well, I did. While I was still in my teens, I was doing it, and I had a little bit of difficulty because of not having enough previous education. To do mathematics that would to figure power lag and impulsion induction motors, which I had to do in my electrical course, I got tutoring from one of my neighbors that lived on the island at that time by the name of Fritz Becker. The Becker family still owns a cottage on Palm Avenue, or that'd be Andy's.
Andy Ross
Ross's
Road,
yes. The name it is now.
So you took correspondence courses and became an electrician, is that?
I took a couple other courses. At one time I thought that, well, I'd taken a diesel engineer course and thought I had a job lined up and went across the United States to get an engineer job on a tuna ship, and then couldn't get a passport out of the United States because I couldn't prove I was ever born.
No birth certificate?
No birth certificate. Apparently they, where I was born, they had no record of it. They had, I never did get a original birth certificate, but I finally got what they called a delayed action birth certificate about several years later.
Well, then you're not as old as you say you are you?
I'm as not from my birth certificate, if you count from the time we got that registered. But that's where I finally got it was when one of my uncles died. He happened to have a my grandmother's family Bible that had a record in it, and the neighbors picked that up and shipped it to my oldest sister, and she thought that anything in there of any value should go to the oldest grandchild, which was Roy Wightman. That'd be Carl's older brother. So she boxed up everything that she didn't take out of the box and shipped it to him. And when he was unpacking the box, why, my father says, "I recognize that Bible. That was my mother's Bible." And we looked into it, and here was a family record. So at that time, my father was so feeble that he couldn't walk up the steps of Lee County Courthouse, so I practically carried him up, but got him in there so as he could swear that that record was true. And then they finally got issued what they called a delayed action birth
registration.
Yes, and
Well,
that's all that I have to this day.
Well, then after you couldn't get that diesel job, you came back to the island?
I didn't make it back again then till after World War II, because shortly after that time they, well, in December 7th, that was 41, was when Pearl Harbor was bombed. When the day Pearl Harbor was bombed, I was in Monterey, California.
Uh-huh.
And of course, traveling was rather expensive, so I didn't make it back. I eventually let Uncle Sam ship me back.
I see. Well, then when did you take your electrical training? After World War II?
It was before World War II, and I was company electricians all through World War II for the 51st General Hospital. I was responsible for all outside wiring. But while I was in California, the time I served my period as grunt, as they call it, I had to work 1 year as a grunt before they let me put a pair of climbing spurs on. Greater part of that was putting a line through Carmel Valley headed toward Julesboro at the big sum of 35 cents an hour, and we had to be able to dig a 5.5 foot hole to put a pole into with a 5-foot shovel.
That's kind of hard to do. What was the first job you ever had, Joe? When you were a child.
You're getting think of that'd be rather difficult to come up with, because a lot of these little odd jobs that you wouldn't even consider as being a job. When I was 16 years old, a little bit better, the first time that I took a contract, that's what I think you might be referring to, was at the time the bridge was replaced after the 26 hurricane. Well, let's see, I was almost 17 then, but anyway, we built, I built the approach to that bridge. And the odd thing that happened was at that time was J.L. Lofton was overseeing the bridge itself, and I didn't have any tools of my own, so as I borrowed an axe that was so dull that I could lay down and go to sleep on it without cutting anything. Borrowed the axe from Ben Long, and borrowed a shovel from somebody else, and wheelbarrow, and because I didn't own anything of my own hardly. So in order to make the curve of that approach, I went out 90 feet from the nearest edge and drove a stake and took a fishing string and used it like you'd draw a circle with a string on a piece of paper, 90 feet to the inner edge of the circle, and then I went about 20 feet further to draw the edge of the outer edge of the circle to build that curve that come off at the end of the bridge. But while I was doing that, I was asked J.L. Lofton if he had something that I could sharpen the axe with. And he said yes, he had a little grindstone on the back end of his Model T Ford pickup truck. So I went across on the Sanibel side where he was camped, and with his permission, and was sharpening the axe on the grindstone. And I commented about them putting a steel body on the Ford pickup at that time. I thought that would be better than the wooden boxes that we'd put onto them before that time, but I didn't realize how quick they'd rust out. If anything, some of the old wooden boxes outlasted the steel boxes. The steel beds rust so quickly. But during our conversation, he says, I'm going to trade this in on a new one as soon as I go back to town. And I says, what are you going to get for this one? And he says, $50. And I says, would you sell it to me for $50 and the grindstone? And he laughed because and said yes, but he says, I'll have to use it until I get ready to go back to town. And that was all right. So I, when he got ready to move off the island, I helped him move down to Bailey's store where he could get the aboard the Gladys. And on the way back, somebody later on in life says, well, how does an airplane compare with a motor vehicle? And I says, well, the first motor vehicle I ever owned was that Model T Ford. And if I pulled the throttle all the way down and the spark adjusted right, I could go 40 miles in an hour on 2 gallons of gasoline. And when I got on an airplane that would do 100 miles in an hour on 5 gallons of gasoline, the ratio on the gasoline was exactly the same, but the airplane was sure cheaper on tires.
Now, Joe, I'd like to talk some more about the island roads here. You told me that formerly there was a road went all the way along Sanibel and all the way along Captiva and Upper Captiva. Now, of course, our road only comes as far as our present post office. What happened to the rest of that road going north?
It all washed away. And from where the post office is, every bit of it from there north has washed away.
It's washed away. Well, did the hurricanes have anything to do with that washout?
It was a constant erosion, and we have more erosion sometime in northwester, where we have about a week or so of northwester than what we have in one hurricane. The Gulf Stream out here on the greater part seems to move from the northwest toward the southeast. The Gulf Streams is turning clockwise out here.
And that's the major cause
That's
of
the
erosion?
major erosion.
Well, now when the road washed out, the first I can remember, it went only as far as what was then Palm Avenue. And that, of course, has since washed away. Now, when did Munson Street, which is now Captiva Drive Southwest, when did that come into existence?
The from Palm Avenue north was already there when I came in 1917, and a survey had went through from there south to the beginning of survey, but it had never been opened up. People just drove a natural way around through a ridge and down to the post office. So in 1927, we got a volunteer work detail to open it up, and the reason why we got interested in opening it up is a couple cars run together on that crooked road that ran around out through the woods. When there was only a couple or three cars on the island, there was occasionally, even then, people would run together because there was a habit of having the road to themselves and wouldn't really be on the alert looking for somebody else.
So then Munson, from what was the old post office to Palm Avenue, was put in here about 1927.
Yes, we tried to put it in on the straight line, but the few years just before you bought this property, the road was moved over. You might someplace in there see where it was, but it was moved over to make room for the lots to be between the road and the bay.
Well, then the old road would have come through the present property that we're sitting on
It'd
now?
go through that edge of it here, and it'd be cutting a little bit more. The further south you'd go, the more it would cut over.
The more it would cut west.
There's a little deflection out there in the road someplace where they started the curve, but TM moved that himself with the Islanders' consent and with the county's consent, and it's in order to make it fit to lay off into a subdivision.
Well, now we know why why Wild Street over here, that was named for T.M. Wilds.
Yeah.
And Gore was named for Mrs. Gore. Why was Mermond named?
I don't really know Merman.
Then why was Munson named? Where did that name come from?
That Munson name was there when I came in 1917. So I didn't really know.
You don't know where that
those
came
roads,
from. Where did the name Chapin come from?
George Chapin had bought the what had been the Norris property, what was left of it. That'd be the next strip across the island on this side of Twin Palms.
I see. Now, of course, Gore was named for A.M. Gore, wasn't it?
Yes.
A.M. of the A.M. P.M.
Yeah. A.M. Gore was the second husband. To see, his wife had previously married Brainerd, so all three of them are buried up in the local cemetery.
Yes. Now, when did Chadwick get here?
Chadwick bought the almost everything from Binders north in about 1924. Seemed that he had the lead edge of the little land boom that we had here about that time. The subdivision that I'm living in, but before it changed hands about that time, it had belonged to Dickey's and sold to somebody by the name of Cook. And all that property was cleaned up like a park, you know, where there was just a few palm trees and a few things left out there, and it's all grown back up to jungle since then.
Mm-hmm.
And by the early 20s, or right up until after World War I, you go down where what they're using as the road now after they had abandoned the Gulf Drive, and you could, for example, you could be at where the little brown church is and watch the sailboats go up out in the Gulf. Mm-hmm. That was all clear because that was been farmland, and there was no tree. All those trees was growing up since then.
Uh-huh. Well, now there was another name that was mentioned one time here. The name was Randall.
Yes, C.D. Randall was Charlie Knapp's father-in-law, and he owned the place that was later bought by Andy Ross. He owned the same property that Andy Ross owns now.
And did he have the fish house on the county pier?
He had the fish house. Matter of fact is, I'm not sure whether he put the fish house there or Tom Alderman. Tom Alderman built the house out there, and then Randall either bought him out about the elite edge of that land boom I was speaking of.
Yes.
But I don't know just what the transactions were, because there was, at that time, during that land boom, there was all kinds of property changes that you would hear about that never materialized. A lot of those real estate men were just swapping options. They didn't. So there was bragging about what they were going to do, and then wound up by hardly doing anything.
Now, you just mentioned that Randall was Charlie Knapp's father-in-law?
Yes.
Well, was Charlie Knapp the one who built Gulfview Inn?
No, it was my brother built Gulfview Inn. That is the one up on the Gulf, and he bought the central cottages from Charlie Knapp, as Charlie Knapp put together Casabel.
Well, you said he bought the cottages. How did the cottages for Gulfview first get there?
See, my brother bought the place that the place that he lived. He made a dining room into, and he rented out these 8 cottages, or 8 units down in the central part of the island, and his wife did the cooking, and he did the roasting and everything. In other words, the Gulfview at that time was just a family affair.
I see. Well, now, you say that he made his house into a dining room. Is that the same house that is now the Mucky Duck?
Yes.
That's the same one?
Same place, yes.
And how long would you say that all of those cottages at Gulfview have been there?
They were built there in about 1924.
Do you know who built them? Who was the owner when it was built?
Well, Charlie Knapp had built them, and he built them out of whatever he could get a sale on. And he, instead of building them with all the same sized windows, he just, picked up whatever he could buy cheap and built the house to fit the windows. And if you walk around the building, you can still
build
see
it kind of backwards.
Yes, but get the door and then build the building.
Cut the opening in.
Yes, he was.
He did it backwards.
Well, backwards to what most people do things. Most people have to draw up a set of plans and then build to the plans. But he gathered up whatever he could get and then built the walls around it.
Joe, when you were a young man, a young boy, and they were farming these groves, when they picked in the groves, were there any colored people who were here to pick?
None on Captiva or at all on the Captiva, and very few on Sanibel. I think the first families that came on Sanibel was the Walker family, and then Charlie Carter, well, they're intermarried some way, and Harry Walker's wife's name was Crumbs, so there was the Crumbs came over part of the time, and of course the Gabbings, but almost all of those are families that had married into each other one way or the other. They could straighten it out for you. I probably couldn't.
Yes, but there weren't any colored people here when you did this picking that you described to me.
Oh yeah, no, there was. And there was no homesteaders, no colored homesteaders on the islands, and I don't even know that there was any colored homesteaders in the entire Lee County. Although when, Captain Burse, he was a Confederate, captain in the Confederate Army, and some of those people came down here to get out of underneath the carpetbaggers and scalawags that was making life miserable for them in the
north.
So,
but there were none here when you came.
No,
none
sir,
at all.
None at all.
Well, Joe, we've talked about a lot of things, but we haven't talked yet about hurricanes. Now, you must have been on the island when some of the hurricanes came. Were you here during the 1919 hurricane?
I was here in the 1919 hurricane. It was not nearly as vicious a hurricane as some that we've had since then, but it came in such an angle that it cut through the outside, what they at that time called protection ridge. And that let all the sloughs fill up with salt water and killed a lot of the grapefruit groves. Completely killed Hal Pryson's grapefruit grove, and most of Bryant's and all of our grapefruit trees, and most of Carter's grapefruit trees. So it was that was the reason.